So around the world, cities have started to deploy drones in a variety of missions, saving lives, reducing costs, and delivering better services. What does this mean for Dublin? And what does this mean for the Irish drone industry? That is, I suppose, one of the key issues of this report. In this report, we've looked at the best practices that are taking place around the world. We've looked at the benefits, but also some of the challenges, and then from a top-down approach, and then tried to understand how that would work in Dublin, both in terms of where the Irish drone industry is, what the public's view of drones are, where the first systems or where the first programs could take place, and then what should be the next steps to if people want this, to actually start moving this forward. So we have taken undertaken a survey of local authority drone programs around the world, trying to tease out where the very best practices are, where the first benefits could be in terms of saving lives, reducing inefficiencies, improving the environmental benefits for everybody, and then understand how that will really apply in some granularity to Dublin. So this means really taking a proper global approach. So we look at what fire services are doing around the world, police services, and then understand exactly the role of each stakeholder, because this is an entirely new industry. No one's ever done anything like this before, and we're not sure yet where the boundaries between the various stakeholders are, where the public has a role to play, where the local authorities and where the national regulator has a role to play, and of course the industry itself. So this is very much a preliminary research to understanding how the whole ecosystem is going to work. And this is what we looked at: the benefits and challenges of developing a local authority-led drone strategy, the role of the public as hosts and customers, governance and principles of public engagement, and is Ireland's drone sector ready to respond? And if it is, what should be the next steps? You can already see from this that in fact, although drones have started to make a difference, they're still only fairly marginal. In fact, most drone flights by local authorities are training exercises. At the same time, we can also see here that things like target search, which is looking for people who are lost, is a very important part. And this is, I think, one of the critical early areas that if we concentrate on those life-saving, health beneficial services, the things that the public can really see the benefits of, then I think this is a good way to start the entire sort of sector rolling. And we already have now plenty of experience of how fire services around the world have been able to use drones to understand exactly what's the incidents in front of them, where the best place to get into and out of it are, and the scale of some of the challenges that that they're facing. And from this, we can see that already local authorities have started to use drones quite widely. The health and environment sector, public safety, planning and development, transportation, and energy. And I think especially as we move towards an economy which is very much more environmentally focused, we can start to understand that drones will have a critical role to play in looking for emissions and understanding exactly what's happening to the environment around us. But there are clearly challenges. We can't just impose upon people an industry which they might not understand or don't want or feel challenged by. So there are issues around security, privacy, noise, and safety. There is a lack of knowledge about the legal liabilities and insurance, environmental protection. There are regulatory uncertainties as to how these drones can be used and how they're going to be used in the future. And there are a lack of clarity, as we've said, around what the roles of the local authorities could be. And of course, there are people out there who might be using drones not to the best purposes, either through criminal or clueless or careless activities. But Ireland has a very dynamic drone sector. It's one of the world leaders in drone deliveries. And allied that to a close community of stakeholders where the regulators, the operators, The local authorities speak to each other on a daily basis. This gives Ireland a tremendous foot up in this industry. And Ireland's an aviation-minded country. And I think, as we'll see in the surveys that are done, that the public have a very positive attitude towards new technology and aviation, especially. So this is really good news for Ireland's drone industry.
So I guess to understand how local government drone ecosystem could work, we've got to roll it back a bit here and take a look at the wider kind of landscape in terms of drones and the global civilian drone market. And of course, you know, that's been priced at a multi-billion market value. Different drone technologies, platforms, sensors that Phil mentioned there. Drone services then from data gathering right through to specialist services like search and rescue and so on. You know, how the regulatory piece plays in here. Traffic management infrastructure a must before we can scale these. At the moment, a lot of drone activities and operations, people may not realize it, but they are kind of quite localized, hyper-localized. And the importance of, you know, true demonstrator pilots, where we bring drones in where they're addressing the activities that they need to. So rather, for example, carrying out a drone demonstrator out in the middle of nowhere for you know, some sort of urban data gathering, that could be done in again a responsible manner closer to urban centres. And of course, the current status in terms of drone operations from full BD loss right through to urban air mobility. And I guess the benefits and opportunities, we've mentioned those before, from data gathering right through to advanced air mobility. And there, advanced air mobility takes in the wider brief. It kind of almost subsets in urban air mobility and looks not just at urban, but also rural settings. And of course, I guess when we think of local government, you know, and in terms of all of the responsibilities they have, in terms of collecting data and gathering information, that's quite critical here. The role of artificial intelligence developments, and in there we're being quite kind of practical in terms of the platforms, those autonomous drone platforms, the sensor technologies that are on these platforms, from optical to LiDAR, navigation, radar, gas sniffing sensors, right through to machine learning to take those you know, large gigabytes of data sets and try and kind of turn them into useful information. And again, how we can use and reuse some of those lessons learned in the conventional, I guess, air traffic management, bring those into UTM, but modify them because it's a completely different, I guess, kettle of fish in trying to organize drones and to ensure that we've got safe, responsible urban air mobility and advanced air mobility systems in place.
We spoke briefly about Ireland's strengths and weaknesses, and this gives you some idea about what we think the strengths and weaknesses are. When the strengths are very strong, the weaknesses, none of the weaknesses are really deal breakers. In fact, some of them are positive. Poor weather that Ireland often experiences is actually quite a positive, because if you can fly drones in the kind of climate and weather conditions in Ireland, you can fly them anywhere. So they're extremely exportable. Some of these weaknesses, I don't think they're not particular to Ireland, and everybody is working very hard on them around the world. And one of the benefits that Ireland has is this community. They're part of a much larger community where data is shared, and particularly useful is the strength of the relationship between the various stakeholders, and that is probably one unique feature which I think is very, very positive for the Irish drone industry.
And I guess here, one of the main findings in the work that we've done with DCC in collaboration, myself and Phil, is looking at the whole idea of societal trust, and it's something that we kind of take for granted, and sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of exactly define what we mean there. But all we're talking about there is to show that there's transparency. There is some table or platform that all representatives can come into and air their views, and to discuss the pros and cons of these new technologies, because yes, they will bring benefits, but equally, I'm sure if you can imagine somebody sitting on the balcony and watching a drone buzzing up and down on a Friday afternoon, delivering, takeaways, they may want to have some kind of input as to how that's regulated. So, of course, building that societal trust is founded on the regulatory regime, but it needs to be kind of expanded and something a bit more or a bit larger than just the regulatory side. So that's where the governance model comes in.
So Dublin City Council commissioned a national public sentiment survey in September and October 2021, looking at the public's views of the drone industry. And there are some quite unusual results from here. Very, very high support for drones to be used in public services. Unusually high, I would have to say. But there's a very, very positive technology awareness, feeling positive about drone technology, I have to say, when you look at this similar results from other parts of the world, you don't often get these very high figures. So again, that's a very positive moving forward.
So then coming back into that whole idea of building that societal trust, you can see on the left the governance model, and on the right the stakeholders and the roles and responsibilities. But if we go back to the left-hand side here, you can see at the heart of it are the customers, the citizens, and then we kind of bubble up into those drone technology providers and having some sort of governance, if you like, oversight on that, and again found it outside in terms of the regulatory environment. And I guess it's true to say that sometimes the policy and regulatory landscape is not in complete step with technology, and those are moving at slightly different rates, but again they're, I think, gradually coming together. There's of course ongoing debates on the roles and inputs from different sectors of society, from the aviation authority right through to citizens, and that governance framework should address this. And perhaps there is something there in a public-private partnership that might work out. And just on the right-hand side, I won't dwell too much on this, but you'll see it there, the stakeholders like, for instance, policy and strategy, legislation, enforcement. You'd see Irish Aviation Authority, and then you'd see, innovation and commercialization, and some of the players there, from commercial companies right through to enterprise agencies. The importance, I guess, my own sector, which is research and education there, and that kind of, affects a lot of areas within the drone ecosystem. And again, this, I guess, is trying to kind of capture that idea of the drone ecosystem, where you're moving not in any particular order around from the customers there in the bottom left right around to the impacts on the right. But like you need customers, you need services, you need some sort of guardrails, if you like, in the form of governance and UTM and rules and so on there at the top. And then it's to try and build those benefits. So it's like having this virtuous circle, although this isn't a perfect virtuous circle here, but I think you get the general idea.
To make it even more complicated, we are actually on a very fast-moving industry here. At the moment, 99.9% of all drone operations are flown within visual sight of the pilot. But fast forward a few years' time, we're going to start moving beyond visual line of sight. And when that happens, then we open up really the industrial core of this industry. At the moment, we're experimental stage. This is the first stage of urban air mobility. We're testing the regulations, we're testing the technologies, we're looking at the standards, seeing what works and what doesn't work. And if the timelines are right, then from 2024, 2025, then we can really start the big industrialization phase where you can start, where people can actually start to make money out of drones. Very few people are making money out of drones at the moment, but once you start 1 person to 20 drones, once you start flying beyond visual line of sight, and once you start getting people flying in drones, then suddenly that's when the industry will start to mushroom. So so we see 2025 to 2035 as the real first commercialization, mature level of urban drone and passenger air taxis. 2035, who knows? There'll be all sorts of things out there which we haven't thought about yet. The exponential increase in artificial intelligence systems, in aeronautical engineering, it's happening at an extraordinary rate. And one of the problems we have is trying to keep up with some of the technology innovations that are happening. So from 2035, it's going to be extraordinary. But 2025, 2024 is in many ways the real kickoff point. So what do we need to do? Given all these incredibly complex issues, well, we have to keep an eye on what's happening around the world and look at the positive and benefit impacts. We've got to develop a roadmap and understand exactly where the responsibilities for all the different stakeholders, especially local governments, will actually lie. And see their role not just as proponents and leaders in drone services, but also key stakeholders in the whole ecosystem. So whatever drone services emerge, whether it's public or private, there's a key stakeholder role for them. And then from that, build the trust of the communities. I mean, this could be one of the key roles. In fact, I think personally, this is the key role that they have to play, that they can connect this industry to communities and build that trust, which is going to be required. So everybody has confidence in the industry going forward. I think it's also important to look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the Irish drone industry in terms of its global and its local profile. So that means perhaps doing a bit of a deeper dive into the industry and seeing where investment could be targeted, but also sort of capture what's already been done, which is very important. And there is no better way of communicating than education, making people aware what's coming so they can early on understand some of the issues they need to be aware of. And that means drone testing zones where people can come and look and get some kind of idea about how loud they're going to be, what they can do. And also within those testing zones, have the regulators trial all sorts of different kind of operations so they can understand too what the technology is that they're going to have to be licensing and certifying. And looking at the future, and this is very much a future of highly complex systems flying, some flying with people on board, and that again is a huge burden on the regulators because this is something they've never really had to deal with before. So there'll be a lot of testing and trials and talking to other regulators around the world, and seeing where, for example, the first cities such as Paris in 2024 who plan to have people flying in electric air taxis, keeping an eye on that, seeing how that works, seeing what the positives and some of the complexities are in that.
So I guess if we look at some of the strategic commercial development areas here in Ireland, like really, what is Ireland, known for, across Europe and internationally, we've got a very good digital tech industry, if you like. So one obvious kind of stopping off point are digital services. And, we're not just talking about precision agriculture or, mapping and so on, but just linking back into what Phil was talking about there, it could be something got to do with the trust side of things, that as part of the rollout of these new drone air traffic management systems, there could be something there around trust, for example, that could be developed as a digital service. Drone UAM and AMs, we've mentioned those, and from logistics through to people carriers. Specialist services is another obvious one. And some work is going on here with some of the SMEs, like for instance, DroneSAR here in Ireland, looking at search and rescue. Digital drone technologies, of course, from sensor development right through to machine learning processors, specifically designed to, for example, utility lines where they're trying to kind of carry out critical infrastructure inspection. Scalable business models is an interesting area. And like, again, Ireland, remember, has a good and is well known as, for its leasing aircraft globally. So there may be something there in shared drone services and fleet management and that wider kind of use space UTM side. And of course, training and certification. Again, here in Ireland, we've got a very strong sense of, education and training, and that indeed is prevalent in the whole drone industry.
So what should we do next? We've talked about this briefly, but prioritizing healthcare and medical emergencies in the first trials, so people can actually see the benefits early on. Develop a passenger urban air mobility strategy. Many cities around the world are already doing this. They're looking at, say, routes from city centers out to the airports as one obvious use case, seeing whether that will work. I mean, one of the things that everybody talks about, I think is terribly important. This cannot be, the urban air mobility strategy cannot be something just for the wealthy. It has to be something which is affordable and inclusive. Now, is this possible? We don't know yet, but it is, for this industry to work, everybody has to have a stake in it. So we have to look at not just the technology, but also the financing and the economics of that. Sandboxes, this is a strange expression, I know, but they're very important. So these are areas where all these technologies and sometimes the business cases can be trialed in a safe environment. So we can look at things like 5G communications, which will be probably critical to making sure that everything works within a safe digital platform. We try and make this from day one a digital, automated, heading towards autonomous industry, and that requires a lot of trials and a lot of testing to make sure that the regulators are happy with what's going to be happening. And we have to have, as this scales up, as we go from 3 people to 1 drone, to 1 person to 100 drones, we have to be clear that everybody is moving at the same speed, that there are no areas where people feel uncertain or unhappy. And that means continually talking to stakeholder groups to make sure that they are part of this dynamic sector. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
Okay, well, folks, from myself and Phil, and indeed our colleagues at Dublin City Council and Smart Dublin, we hope you've learned something additional here about local government drone ecosystem. And if you want to find out a bit more, we would encourage you to go online onto Smart Dublin and download the report. Thank you.
Thank you.